What we found over time is that there's lots of good strategies, but a strategy is not as meaningful as really focused execution. So we didn't think we had necessarily had the best or the most unique strategies, but we wanted to be the best executors. And we saw that over and over in all the markets. We had a lot of companies that we competed against that had great strategy statements, great vision statements, great mission statements, but they couldn't execute themselves out of a box. And we just ran circles around those companies.
Welcome to the Strategy at Scale podcast, brought to you by Scaling Up, Outthinker, and Growth Institute. Our mission is to cut through that sea of contradictory business advice to get to what actually works. We interview entrepreneurs and business builders who have successfully scaled companies across industries and extract proven, high-impact strategies to scale the value of whatever you are building in the world. You just heard from Matt Wallach, a seasoned entrepreneur, business leader, and co-founder of Veeva Systems, one of the most successful enterprise software companies in the life sciences industry. Veeva pioneered the use of cloud-based solutions for pharmaceutical companies, redefining how businesses in the sector approach CRM, data management, compliance, and more. Under Matt's leadership, Veeva went public in 2013 and had a few hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. Today, as the time of this recording, the company boasts revenues of approximately $2.75 billion. Beyond his success in software, Matt is also part owner of the Philadelphia Union Professional Soccer Team, an organization that my family has deep ties with. And through that connection, I got to learn about his story, his journey, his insights on execution, and his deliberate approach to strategic decision-making. And I knew we had to have him on the podcast. In this episode, we talk about why picking the right first customer may determine your company's fate, and how Veeva avoided the mistake of chasing the biggest clients too soon. Why saying no to customer feature requests was one of Veeva's biggest competitive advantages. How Veeva made the strategic decision to go deep in life sciences rather than expand into new industries, and how this created decades of growth opportunities. How transitioning to a public benefit corporation wasn't just an ethical choice, it became a strategic advantage that strengthened customer trust and long-term business resilience. And why execution is so fundamental to strategy, how Veeva's disciplined, focused execution helped them outpace competitors with bigger visions but weaker follow-through. Matt's story is a masterclass in execution, focus, and discipline in scaling a business. Let's dive in. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being here. I have gotten to learn and admire your journey and so many things I want to talk about. And I'm thrilled that we're able to get some time with you to sit down with us and share parts of your story.
Thanks, Kaihan. Pleasure to be here with you.
And where are you dialing in from today?
I'm at my home in Villanova, Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia.
Great. So I have already given the audience a little bit of background on you, but I'd love to, before we get into your entrepreneurial experience with Veeva, I'd love to know a little bit about you personally. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What did you do before you started this company?
So I grew up outside Philadelphia, a place called Wallingford in Delaware County. At the time, Delaware County was not really a thing, but it's now become Delco. So around I would tell people I'm from Delco, and we just had Delco, the movie just came out. So
really?
Total thing. So I'm from Delco.
What's the Delco movie about?
It's like a coming of age movie of three teenagers who have like one night out where they try to get in trouble for the first time in their lives. It has really nothing to do about Delco, except that it's an overarching theme that like, dude, I'm going to die in Delco. Like I'm never getting out of this place. And they used a lot of local restaurants and stores to help fund the movie. And so there's a lot of familiar places. Me and my kids had a cameo. It was super fun for everybody.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
But pretty low budget stuff. So I grew up in Delco. I was a soccer player. That's all I ever wanted to do. When the Yale coach called me at home, I didn't even know where Yale was, but he wanted me to play soccer. And I thought, that sounds great. And so I ended up going to Yale for undergrad. I played soccer there. And after a couple of years of consulting, I went back to business school where I also played soccer. We had a really good competitive team where we played other NBA schools. And then I got into software, and it was sort of accidental. When I was living between undergrad and graduate school, I was living in Asia for a year, and I met a woman there who is now my wife. She was the lead singer of a rock band in the little town I lived in on Borneo. And uh, in between my first and second year of business school, I wanted to live with her before I brought her over on a fiancé visa. And so I had to do it somewhere in Southeast Asia where a Filipino could get a visa. And the only job I was able to get that summer was in software. And that's how I got into software, was through trying to live with my fiance at the time. And then when I got out of school, I took the first job I was offered because I wanted to get to know my wife. I had to buy her winter clothes. We had a lot of stuff to do. You'd never been in Boston. She'd never been anywhere cold. She'd never seen snow. So we had a lot of adventures to do together. And so I took the first job I got. It was in software. I was able to get that interview because I had just done an internship in software. And the company was...
So just going back before you get there, the type of consulting you did between undergrad and business school, and you went to Harvard, and like maybe the stuff that you studied there, what was your, if it wasn't software, what was your interest before the software?
I worked at Booz Allen, which was just generic strategy consulting at the time. They had a government business. They had a commercial business. This was the commercial business. It's since been sold to PwC. I had an industry focus, but not because I chose it, just because that was the partner that interviewed me. And so it was the energy and chemicals. So I did a job in chemicals. I did one in plastics, mobile oil, and I did do one in pharmaceuticals. And that was my first introduction to pharmaceuticals. It was at Procter & Gamble Pharmaceuticals. The result of the project was we told them that this product they wanted to launch, Residronate, was going to be too late. It was going to be the third or fourth to market. And by the way, why are you trying to be a pharmaceutical company at all? It was an interesting project at the end. And they eventually did get out of pharmaceuticals. But, I was an Excel jockey. I was like going through IMS reports and putting numbers into spreadsheets. And we did a war game. It was actually, the interesting part of that was that Booz Allen also had this big commercial business. They did real war games for the U.S. government. We used the same type of approach to war game product releases, product launches. And so I was the guy like running the model overnight while we were doing the simulations. And in every simulation, they failed. And so it was kind of an interesting way to run that project.
Yeah, so I just got off of an interview with a strategy expert, and he said strategy is really just ruling out everything else, and then what's left is the strategy. And it sounds a lot like what you're describing.
I can relate to that. Yeah, I can relate to that a lot, actually.
So let's bring us now. What are you doing? Working in a software company, you're working in software, and you're in Boston. You're newly married. What happens that before you decide to launch Veeva?
So the company I went to was called Veeva Systems. At the time, it was a very hot software company in client server software. The offer was to go out to California and be on the marketing automation team. But my wife wanted to stay in New York because I had just taken her 10,000 miles away from her family and then introduced her to my family in Philly. She didn't want to go 3,000 miles away from them. So she said she wanted to go to New York. So I asked the company if I could still work for them but live in New York, and they had just bought a pharma CRM company in New Jersey. And so they said, yeah, actually, you could go join the pharma team, but you don't know anything about software, really, and you don't know pharma. So why don't you start as an alliances manager? So I was the first vertically focused alliance manager focused on the pharmaceutical industry. And then within 90 days, the product team blew up. They got rid of the head of sales, the head of product. They got rid of the head of engineering, and then I took over the product. So when I was 25, I was running this product line at Siebel, which at the time was a rounding error in Siebel's overall revenue. But by the time I left, 5-6 years later, it was about 15% of Siebel's revenues. But I didn't choose pharma. I chose to not get divorced after being 9 months. And so that was sort of coincidental. And then Siebel sort of cratered with the rest of the tech industry in 2000, 2001. And so we had fun going up, like, the rising tides rise all boats. But then on the way down, like I really saw people's true colors, and I learned a ton about managing when things were not so good. My business kept doing well because the dot-com boom, like pharma companies didn't notice that. So I was running a growing business within kind of a declining company. And after a while, it was not that fun. So I left and I did another pharma thing. It was more in R&D content management. We sold that company after a year. That was in Oregon. I came back to Philadelphia and I joined a company that was pharma data. And we sold that company after 2 years. And that's when I left to start Veeva. So, as a kid, I was always entrepreneurial. I always thought I would start a company. But once I really started working, I didn't sit awake at night saying, I got to start a company. I was just trying to work harder than everyone around me, tell the truth, take care of customers, treat people well. And it just kept working. So it wasn't a big master plan that I had, but if you look at Veeva's products that we developed in the first 10 years, it was the products that I managed as Siebel. It was a CRM product. It was a CTMS product for clinical trial management. It was content management for R&D, and it was healthcare data and master data. Like I had actually done all of those things, but I didn't plan it. It was accidental. But, if I want to tell people how smart I am, I just, leave that part that it was accidental out, and it looks like I had the whole thing planned. But what I learned 9 years serving the pharma industry is I learned the companies that were innovative. I learned the people that were innovative. I learned the companies that you would never want as an early adopter. I kind of knew where the skeletons were, where the bodies were buried. And so when we started Veeva, we didn't waste a whole lot of time answering RFPs for companies that we knew wouldn't be good initial partners.
Tell me about that. What's an example, or what are the attributes of a company that you wouldn't want as an early adopter?
Well, so we were developing a pharma CRM product that replaced existing pharma CRM products. We didn't invent something. We were coming out with the first real software as a service, multi-tenant CRM product geared to pharma companies. And so, and in software as a service, if you do it right, it's multi-tenant, which means everyone's running the same version of the same product all the time. So if one customer fails, there's kind of nowhere to hide. You can't really blame the customer that the product didn't work because it's the same product for everyone, right? So we wanted to make sure we didn't start with companies that were too big because they would crush us. So we started with smaller companies with maybe one product that they were going to market with. And we had a couple customers that were launching a new product. That was good because they didn't have anything old, right? We didn't have to do a big data migration. We just implemented the thing and they could go faster. So we were looking for places where the CIO was willing to take a risk on a small company, but where the CIO understood the potential value of software as a service. Because in pharma, it wasn't like most other industries where the first software as a service that CIOs or the company bought was Salesforce.com. In pharma, there was no Salesforce.com. It didn't work for pharma companies. That's part of why we chose to do pharma first, was because the generic or the horizontal CRM products didn't work. So we actually were the first software as a service that most of our customers ever bought. So there was a whole lot of hard sledding. Like they didn't know how to write a subscription agreement. They were used to doing capital expenses and amortizing that, depreciating that over time. We were an operating expense. So we had a lot of hard sledding to do in the very early days to teach the industry not only what software as a service was, but why it was better for them and how to buy it and deploy it and use it.
Yes.
And so
we had to
convince
finance how to account for it and argue
Exactly. Yeah. Even the accounting was different. So we had to find companies that were either innovative, desperate, or stupid, right? I mean, why would you risk your sales force to a brand new company? And so we looked for a mix of that. We looked for innovative and desperate, hopefully not stupid. But I mean, on paper, like I remember we had the first 5, 6, 7 customers, and then we were in a sales process with Pfizer. And Pfizer at the time, I think, had 12,000 sales reps in the US. And we had, I don't know, maybe 18 people in the company. And we had a big meeting where we went to, I mean, I think it was an RFP process, and we were defending the RFP response. And I think we brought 12 people to the meeting. And the Pfizer guy who was running the meeting said, he sort of looked over his shoulder, he looked both ways. He said, "Did you bring the whole company to the meeting?" And they refused to call us by the name of the company. They called us the 16-person company. So we didn't start with their 12,000 person sales force. We actually started with a sales force for a really niche product with 6 people on it. That was our first project at Pfizer, and it went well. And then we did one that I think there were 23 people on the sales team, and the third one had 35. And after those 3 projects went well enough over about a 15-month period, they did an RFP for the big one, for the big US sales force. And we ended up winning that. But they were still, like, Pfizer has a history of being an innovative company and being the first to buy from a company that later becomes a market leader. And so we knew that we had seen them do it before. They also had a history of killing those companies over time. Well, because they were Pfizer and they expect you to say yes. And so something that we had to get good at very early on was saying, "I love you." The answer is no. Did I mention that I love you? We used to call it the shit sandwich. You tell them something good, you give them the bad news, and then you remind them how good looking they are. So we had a lot of meetings where we were telling Pfizer, "No, you don't want us to build that product that way, or you don't need that feature, or we're not going to do that country yet." Like, it was, and sometimes they'd look at me like, "You realize we're Pfizer, like, no one says no to us. Who do you guys think you are?" We say, "Well, we think we're going to build the best product you ever saw."
What is the problem that you're solving? Or what are the types of product features or capabilities that you are offering and not offering? Because I'm thinking you're selling into a sales force, but are they involved in clinical trials?
So the first product, the one that I've been talking about so far, was just CRM for pharma sales force.
Okay,
We were
got it.
helping the drug reps say the right things to the right doctors at the right time. Remember, pharma sales reps don't actually take orders. So it's just an influence selling. So they're trying to inform the physician community, nurses, PAs, NPs, and especially MDs and DOs about the benefits of their drug versus the competitors. But they don't take orders. So it's all consultative selling. And there's a lot of regulations around that. So what we offered was the ability to do this on mobile devices. The iPad came out while we were still a new company. We ended up having the best iPad product, which really vaulted our growth. But the basics were build a CRM product that pharma reps didn't hate. They hated all the products they were forced to use before. So make it easy enough to use, make it light enough that they don't hate it. At times we said, let's make one that they would love. Pharma reps are probably never going to love their CRM product, but if they don't hate it, they'll use it. And the more they use it, the more valuable it gets for them, for the people that are selling with them, and for the management. And then we just made sure that every implementation was a success. Pfizer was a major, major win for us, and we had to make sure it worked. And we didn't sell to other companies for a period of time so that we could focus the whole company on Pfizer. But once we got kind of over the hump and we had an Accenture team working with us, and we could scale to support that one, started to sell to others, and we were selling them the same exact product. And so we could tell to a little biotech commercializing their first product, "Hey, it's good enough for Pfizer. It should be good enough for you." And it was, and it worked for everybody.
That's great. That's great. What would be the attributes of something that you would say no to Pfizer, a Pfizer request of? I mean, what I hear is, hey, they might be asking for too much. We don't have the capacity to really deliver with confidence in it. But what were the other things that would tell you have to know?
Kind of generically, they were asking for things that were nice to haves for the reps, but that the reps probably wouldn't really use, but that would clutter the screen. An extra button that does this or that. And we would say, yeah, but you're the IT guys. I understand you think that would be cool, but we're going to go on some rep rides and we're going to find out what the reps actually do. And the rep's day was not that complicated when they're in their car going from doctor's office to doctor's office. But there was all kinds of stuff in their systems that made it complex. So we tried to strip that down, kind of back to basics, only build what they needed and what they would actually use. So it was a lot of, we hear you, it sounds like a great idea. It's not going to be in the first version of the product. Let's see if it comes up later, right? That's sort of the shit sandwich version of no, you can't have it. But the other thing is that Pfizer, or I'm not picking on Pfizer in any way. It could be a lot of pharma companies. A lot of teams would tell us, I want a button here that's blue that does X, Y, and Z. And we would say, well, don't tell us how to design the product. Tell us what you need the product to do. What's the job that you need the product to do? Let us design the solution. And over time, customers realized that we were very good at designing a product and building a product that was easy to use for the reps. In fact, if I contrast this to how I did it when I was at Siebel, so I was in charge of the product at Siebel. We literally had a strategy that said, if a customer asks for it on an RFP, we build it into the product. That was horrific, unless you want to start a company 5 years later and replace it, in which case it was met. Because there was so much stuff in the Siebel product that the reps didn't use, but it cluttered the screen. It made it really hard to navigate. And so we were trying to be the anti-Siebel, and the iPad actually helped a lot, because for many years of the iPad, you couldn't write script. You couldn't code on the iPad. So our standard product was it. And it actually really helped for us to build a standard product that worked for the whole industry, ultimately around the world, because you couldn't break it. Where on a laptop, you could code until the cows come home and you could customize it. And I saw it even at Siebel, and I certainly saw it at Veeva, that there were projects that a pharma company would do. It could be a year-long, $5-10 million project to simplify the CRM because there's just too much stuff in it. And so with software as a service, you can see in real time exactly what the users are actually doing. Now, you can't see the actual data, but you can see the objects they're hitting. You can see the buttons they're hitting. So we knew with what was in the product, what the reps were actually using. And so the things that they used the most, we spent the most attention on. How do we make that easier? How do we make it half a second faster? How do we make it one click less? How do we use some knowledge about designing a product? How do we do it so that their finger has to move an inch less every time they're doing this repetitive task? Because going from here to here to here to here, it's a whole lot harder than just staying in one little area. So it was a lot of really smart product design, along with not building too many features.
How did you identify that was something that would be a distinguishing factor for you?
The culture, we actually had a name for it.
Yeah.
Strategy for our products, we wanted to build Lexus products. We weren't trying to build a Ferrari that was the fastest and the most expensive. We weren't trying to build a Volkswagen, which was the most practical and really affordable. We're trying to build a Lexus with all the luxury features you need. It's a little bit expensive, but it's worth it because it's so good. Now, remember, this is 20 years ago. Lexus maybe has a little bit of a different take today.
Yeah, no, but Lexus was Lexus came in to the U.S. from Toyota, and it took off. And
You didn't need a more luxurious product than Lexus. You could have gotten one that was more expensive, but it did everything you wanted. It made you feel good. And that was the best description. And we probably still talk about that, actually.
So very focused on which companies are going to serve, who the early adopters should be. You adopt this Lexus approach and human-centered design approach, which you can do better than your competition because you are a SaaS product, and so you can see, and you can also, there's less personalization at the point of use. And then so I'm hearing you sort of like building this beachhead. What happens next?
Yeah, so we stayed just in the U.S. for 3 years. Then we started to expand with just the CRM product outside the US. We did China and Europe first, then we did Japan, then we did South America, then we did Asia Pacific. And it was the same product, but configured and customized for the different regulations and the different use cases around the world. But it was the same product. And so it enabled our customers to make global decisions, where before they would either make country-specific or regional decisions. And so we were able to save customers millions of dollars in managing across the geographies. And there were kind of new people that were grown up in pharma companies, global head of commercial excellence, and Veeva was their platform. And so we did well in CRM, and we had a decision to make. Do we go into CRM for other industries because we're good at CRM? We have a strong relationship with Salesforce.com. Or do we go deep in life sciences and build more products for life sciences? And we were thinking that both are transferable, but life sciences, marketing, sales, clinical, quality, regulatory, that was a better synergy than CRM in pharma to financial services, insurance, aerospace. So what we did is we set up the company for decades and decades of cross-selling. We're going to the same companies over and over and over. We have about 40 products now. And so, so the first product was built on a Salesforce.com backend initially. It's on its way off now, 20 years later, almost 20 years later. But the next product we built from the ground up. We built our own platform. We called it Vault. And it was to build content management applications for life sciences companies, marketing, clinical, regulatory, quality. A few years later, we built into that platform what we call a row and column, or like a transactional system. So the type of platform that you would need to build a CRM system. So, and having document management, which is very file centric, and a transactional system, which is transaction centric, on the same platform, allowed us to build almost any kind of application that a pharma company was buying. And so when a company would go all in with Veeva, we might replace 200 different pharma vendors. And so if you think about taking out 199 relationships, contracts you have to sign and renew and manage, relationships you have to sign and manage, all these different technologies that you have to keep up to date and upgrade and virus protect, and then you have to integrate all these things. At most of the companies we went to, they spent more money integrating the different things that they bought than they did buying those things. And so Veeva was able to eliminate a lot of this vendor management cost, which in the big scheme of things is actually minor. We also eliminated a ton of data integration and system integration cost. That was major. So companies, the more they bought from Veeva, the more valuable it got. So that set up a really effective cross-selling engine, which allowed us to have the financials that we have. I think it also allows us to have the level of customer success that we had, because we had the idea. So if you buy 30 products from Veeva and one of them is really bad, it sours the whole thing. So we always said we are only as good as the worst product. That meant we couldn't have any dogs. It meant that we charged a fair price for every product. We didn't bundle them together, buy one, get 3 free. Like if you do that, then the ones that you throw in for free are not going to get the kind of focus from a product team that they need. And then those will end up being the worst product that the company buys.
We'll rephrase kind of what you're saying, and the way I'm thinking of it is like, we're going to make these product teams, they're going to have to win the business. They're going to be good enough to win the business, right? There's no one gets like a free pass.
That's exactly right. And so there were 2 main strategies for software companies at the time, and really even today. There's a broad platform So someone like SAP. SAP has, I don't know, 50 products. They don't have a great expense reporting app, but it's integrated with all the other SAP stuff. You can just get it from the same guy. So people buy the expense reporting, but it's not the best. So SAP has some stuff that they're the best, and they have lots of other stuff that's just in the platform, just easier to buy from them. Oracle is an even better example. Oracle doesn't even have best of breed anything anymore, really, but they have lots of stuff. So you can just, we'll just buy it from the Oracle guy. We like him. The other approach was best of breed, where you just do an RFP for every single piece of what you need, and you buy the best thing that you can. And that's what pharma was doing, because there were very few companies that had products in multiple categories. So what Veeva tried to do is integrated suite of best of breed applications. So that if you went out for an RFP for just one thing, you would choose the Veeva product because it was the best available. And then the fact that it was integrated with everything else and it came from the Veeva guys that you trust, that was great. We did not want someone to buy the clinical trial management app because it was integrated with the other stuff, even though it wasn't very good. And so integrated and best of breed was the strategy there. And that's hard. That means you can't have a dog product. Every product has to be good.
What about your pricing strategy? How did you think about the pricing? Because now it's an interesting pricing choice, right? To not offer like a bundle, which is sort of like the standard software approach. How did your pricing strategy evolve?
So we tried to calculate what they were paying for what they were using today. And then we wanted to charge less than that. But we didn't charge 50% less than that. We would charge 20% less than that, 25%. So we figured if we're allowing them to save money and they get a better product that's easier to integrate from a company that cares, that's a win-win. Now, when you get large market share and you become a profitable company, it looks like it's easy for those prices to look high, especially as you get high market share, then the cost of the alternatives comes down. So it doesn't cost less to own one of those competitive products. But if you threaten to leave, you can get their next version for half the price, or a third of the price, or 10% the price. So all of our competitors got dramatically less expensive as they were losing market share to us. So it made Veeva look more expensive, but we were still trying to base it off of the value that we were creating versus where they were before we had that product.
Got it. Yeah, and that's sort of nicely aligned with the Lexus metaphor as well.
But our prices didn't increase or decrease over time. We didn't have a price increase for like 11 years, which means if you were Pfizer that bought in 2008, you're paying the exact same price in 2020. So you're really paying less. We didn't do that much to kind of try to get credit for that, but our competitors raised their prices 5 to 7% a year. That price that Pfizer was paying would have been double. So we were very customer friendly in that respect, but because of the economics of software, we were able to afford to do that. So we didn't try to be martyrs that we didn't increase prices, but it wasn't until inflation really kicked up in about 2001, we're looking at 5, 6, 7, even 8% inflation, I think, for the first time. And there was a lot of wage inflation for a few years. We had to really increase the wages for everyone in the company. And we had our first price increase. I think it was 3%. And I think inflation was twice that. And if anyone pushed back, they said, hey, come on, you've had this product for 10 years. We never increased the price. Please don't give us a hard time now. And everyone else was increasing their prices at the same time, probably even more.
Not very precise question here. I'll just kind of ask. Let's just see what pops up. You talk about the decision of being industry-centric as opposed to CRM-centric. You talked about when to raise the price, how to price. And I'm just like thinking about it's sort of like you are looking at how much cash we have, how much capacity we have, and where are we going to invest next to open up the next whatever horizon of growth. Generally, how do you think about that? What do you consider?
We were basically trying to figure out what's the next product we're going to build for the life sciences industry. That's what we did for a very long time. There have been some announcements since that we're looking at other things, but for all practical purposes, we're selling to life sciences companies. And we started in commercial, and then we went back into clinical and R&D and quality. I had a spreadsheet which listed out all the major parts of a pharma company and how big we thought the software market was for each one. And that spreadsheet was stack ranked for what we thought was big and hard. And we wanted the biggest, hardest problems because we could charge the most money for it and create the most value. If something was easy and it wasn't really a problem, then we stayed away from it. And so if you were to look at my spreadsheet that I had in 2007, 2008, when we started the company, you'd laugh at it because I was way wrong. These software markets were much, much bigger. I didn't realize they had 20 different clinical systems. They had 30 different regulatory systems. They had 40 different quality systems. I didn't even realize that. So as we learned more and more, and our customers shared more and more with us about where their pains were, we were getting better and better at sizing the markets. And so the first thing was the market had to be big enough to justify building a product for. So if it was less than about $100 million in potential sales for Veeva, then we question, is that really a market? Are those features of another product? Are those things that we could do for free? Or are those things that we just let the ecosystem handle them because they're not that important? So we were mostly going after billion-dollar problems.
Got it.
And then features, we would decide, is that feature big enough to charge for, or do we include it for free? That was tricky sometimes. And the major, if there was a rule of thumb, if there was a bunch of vendors that did it, and pharma companies had a line item in their budgets every year for it, that it was fair to charge separately for it. But we didn't want to charge a lot for add-on features that if you're using Veeva, you're going to buy it, right? It just doesn't make sense to buy that little thing from someone else. And because they were most likely going to buy it from us, we didn't want to stick it to them. So we tried to make the add-on products reasonable enough that it was obvious and it was a no-brainer to buy it. But we had to charge enough that we could have a product team on it that it was really good and it was the best, because it had to be the best. And so that's how we justified it. You say, well, you want us to give you that for free, but look, you spend $1 million a year on it. There's these 6 companies that are competing. If we have the worst product, you're not going to be happy with us. So we're going to charge for it. We're going to do it right. We're going to make it better than you've ever seen.
I'd love to talk more about the front end marketing, client side, but I also want to cover a few other kind of organizational things. Like, you decided to become a public benefit corporation. When did you decide that, and why did you decide to do that?
So the discussion of a public benefit corporation started probably more than 10 years ago. And the reason it came up was because in Delaware C Corps, the job of the board of directors is to maximize shareholder value. That's the job of the board. Keep people out of jail, but make sure the executives are honest. But it's basically maximize shareholder value. So your job...
And timing, this is after you go public then. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, after we went public. So we went public in 2013. It's a little after that. And our board didn't operate that way. We never talked about the stock price in a board meeting. We just never did. It was not what we were focused on. And it did not feel like the job of our board was to maximize shareholder value. That's not what they did. It's not how we thought. The job of the board was to make sure we're making customers successful. We're doing the right things for the industry. We're creating a great place for people to work. That's what we focused on in the board meetings. And so it just felt unnatural and almost dishonest that if you read the articles of incorporation of the company, that's not the job the board was doing. And a public benefit corporation, you could choose your stakeholders. And so it took a few years to get ourselves ready for it, to get the board ready for it. But ultimately, we announced that we were going to do it. And then we went on a listening tour. We announced that we were thinking about it. We went on a listening tour. We talked to investors and customers, partners, employees. And what we heard was that no one actually knew what a public benefit corporation was. So we had to explain it to everyone. And the way that we positioned it was, listen, we're in this for the long term. We care most about customers and employees. And if we do the right thing for customers and we help the industry and we create a great place for employees to be, shareholders will benefit forever. And that we always believed to be true. But I knew that I was going to retire early. And when we had a discussion with a CEO about kind of buying another Veeva product and another Veeva product, say, sometimes they'd say, well, listen, we're spending so many millions of dollars with you guys. How do I know you're not going to take advantage of us? And if it was me or Peter, we could tell them, listen, you know us, you trust us, we're good people, we're not going anywhere, but that can't last forever. And so we wanted to get it codified forever to make sure that we would never take advantage of customers. So part of why you can go all in with Veeva is because you can trust that we will never take advantage of you, because as a public benefit corporation, your success, the success of the industry, is tied for first as shareholder value. And so we will not do something bad for customers to help shareholders, ever. And we never did. But we could look a CEO in the eye and say, I won't take advantage of you because my board won't allow. And that lasts forever now. So we did it because it felt honest to have the board's job actually match what it says their job is. But we also did it because we care deeply about the industry. We wanted people to believe us when we tell them we care about your success. And it's not only so that a customer can buy more, but if you imagine, like, if we sit down for a discussion with the FDA about how to streamline regulatory submissions. If it was Pfizer, Novartis, Amgen, and then Veeva, the public company, profitable public company, no one's listening to us in that meeting because they're thinking we're there just to try to make money. If we're there as a public benefit corporation, and we have lots of examples of investments that we've made without trying to get anything back, just because we think it's good for the industry, then we're a normal participant sitting around the table, and our input will be listened to, not kind of through a side eye, but listened to as an industry participant who cares about the success. And we might actually be just trying to help.
What else do you do to instill that organizationally down? Because I can see at the governance level, locked in, but you seem to care a lot about culture and think a lot about culture. What do you guys do to really live it?
So we live by core values. We have 4 core values. They used to change quarter by quarter when we first started the company. Like right now, the first one's customer success. Actually, the first one is do the right thing. We didn't write that down for a long time, but we got to 3,000-4,000 employees. We thought, you know what? Maybe everyone doesn't just feel this. Let's write down, do the right thing. The next one is customer success. Now, when we started the company, we had no customers, and so customer success wasn't one of them. The first one when we started the company was speed. But now they're do the right thing, customer success, employee success, and speed. And it's been a long time since we've changed them, but we review it before every big meeting. We review it on the company call every quarter. We review it before every board meeting. We don't just list them out the way that I just did. We talk about them and why they're still important. And I think when you communicate clearly for many years and you walk the walk, then people believe it. And it's not cool to do something that's bad for customers at Veeva. It's not cool to do something that hurts another employee. It's not cool to drag your feet and to wait until the last minute or to slow the team down. That's just not how we do it. And so the culture of the place is, let's get it done and put the customer first. And, we're all busy. Everyone's busy. No one finishes what they want to do every day or every week or every quarter. The core values are also up there to say, all right, well, I got 10 things to do. I only have time for one. Which is the best for customers? And go there. So it was high level culture, high level feeling about the company, but it's also like low level. I got to make a decision about what I'm going to do in the next hour. And you could use that as the guide.
What is a question that you often get and advice that you like to give that we haven't talked about?
One question I get a lot, and it's advice I do like to give, is about hiring the senior team. And this one I pull out first because I see it as one of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make. You can't have a VP of everything before you have people to do the work. Sometimes I'll get pitched from an entrepreneur. They've raised some money. They have a VP of this and a chief revenue officer and a chief marketing officer and a VP of international. And my question is like, so who's doing the work? So we didn't do that. We hired people to do the work. And when we couldn't manage them all, then maybe we would hire a manager. We didn't have a chief. I ran marketing and business development and marketing and sales for a long time, and strategy for a long time. We didn't have a chief marketing officer until within a year of going public. What that did for us is, so I was managing marketing in 1 or 2% of my time. It meant that we didn't spend too much on marketing. And we only spent on the stuff that was most important. Because if it wasn't, I didn't have time to think about it. It was a great forcing function to make sure that we didn't hire too many people. We didn't waste money. And so that was the same in Alliance. I was the head of alliances too. Like Alliance, like a lot of small companies have more partners than they have customers. Like, what are you doing? Like, if you have alliances people telling product people what to do, you're blowing it. The customer should tell product people what to do. That's it. And only the product people should be telling the engineers what to do. So don't hire the most senior people you can find. Get people to do the work. And then when there's so many of them, they need more management, then hire some senior people. So that's one. Another is people ask me about strategy all the time. What's the best strategy? How do you come up with the best strategy? And what we found over time is that there's lots of good strategies, but a strategy is not as meaningful as really focused execution. So we didn't think we had necessarily had the best or the most unique strategies, but we wanted to be the best executors. And we saw that over and over in all the markets. We had a lot of companies that we competed against that had great strategy statements, great vision statements, great mission statements, but they couldn't execute themselves out of a box. And we just ran circles around those companies.
Yeah. I mean, I hear that you made key strategic choices and you were thoughtful about it, but they're not sitting there on a document as a strategy of 6 principles. It's like you made your decision, then it's all aligning your choices and investments and actions to that.
Yeah.
Saying no to everything else. Love it.
Yeah, that discipline to say no to everything else. You sort of said that at the end of that comment. That's sometimes the most important thing. There were so many times that we could have built another product. We could have hired someone who seemed like they were great without going through the whole process. The discipline to do it the right way all the time and not cut corners and to stick to your knitting. I mean, it's maybe the most important thing. I think focus on execution and discipline to say no.
2 more quick questions. Is there a book that you love or that you recommend for people that are scaling businesses?
So I think you have to know Crossing the Chasm and Innovator's Dilemma. You have to know it. That's not even like a recommendation. That's like, if you have a laptop, you should have those computers next to it. Those are important. They're very simple. And every year that goes by, they get proven right again and again and again and again. So that's just table stakes. Beyond that, I recommend a book called Confidence by Rosabeth Moss Cantor. That's my favorite business book. It's about how winning streaks and losing streaks begin and end. It's a lot of sports references, which is fun for me.
Love it.
That book is so true. And I referred to lessons from that book, I think, more than any other in my career. So that's the one that I recommend.
Awesome. Love it. That was not on my radar. What's now for you? What's your chairman? You're retired. You're a partial owner of a soccer team. What do you see for you and your family in the next chapter?
Yeah, so I'm on the Veeva board and a private board. I'm on 3 nonprofit boards. And I basically play as much golf as my body will handle. I go to physical therapy to recover from playing a lot of golf. I watch a lot of soccer, mostly the Union, but I'll be gearing up for the World Cup. I plan as many fun trips and events for my family and friends as I can. Charity dinners, golf trips. I run a golf tournament every year. We raise money for charities. I'm still trying to hang out with the kids. I got 1 in high school and 2 college age. But the thing about my retirement, I think if I had to summarize it, that makes me the happiest, that gives me the most satisfaction, is the ability to choose how I use my time. That's it. I mean, that's the key. I figured out what makes me happy, and then I do as much of it as I can. And it's not more complicated than that. Now, once you have enough money that you don't have to worry about making money, it's easier to just focus on being happy. But I still give the advice all the time to people, no matter where they are in their careers. Figure out what makes you happiest and figure out a way to do more of it.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and taking the time to think through all of this and process it and package it in a way that people that are building things in the world can apply it. I really appreciate that.
Sure. Well, it was my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Strategy at Scale. Thank you to our guest, Matt Wallach, our producer, Oscar Perez, and our teams at Scaling Up, Outthinker, and Growth Institute. If you like what you heard, please follow, download, and subscribe. I'm Kyan Krippendorf. We'll catch you soon with another episode of Strategy at Scale.